You're listening to Big Table, a podcast about books and conversation presented by Hat and Beard Press, Dub Lab, and Gold Diggers in Los Angeles. I'm your host, JC Gabel. For each episode, we speak to one author about a singular book in a long-form interview. Each interview is then followed by a brief reading, sometimes from the same book being discussed, sometimes by a like-minded title and a different author. But every episode does retain a loose theme throughout, and is inspired by the work of radio host and oral historian Studs Terkel. Thanks for listening. Photographer Jona Frank grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, a suburb of Philadelphia in the 70s and 80s before moving west at the dawn of the 1990s. As an artist, she is known for her immersive studies in subcultures, an American high school, a British boxing club, a Christian college. In her innovative new book entitled Cherry Hill, published by Monacelli Press, she turns the camera lens on her own story in a visual memoir that reimagines her childhood through elaborately staged cinematic photo shoots. 3 young women play Jona at various stages of adolescence and adulthood. Her mother is played by actress Laura Dern, whom she knows from the school both their children attend in Santa Monica, California. Sprinkled throughout the book are vignettes and recollections that read like workshopped short stories. The book, in fact, began with writing, not images, 5 years ago. On its face, Frank's Cherry Hill childhood appears to be scenes of an idyllic mid-century American dream. But in reality, like many families, mental illness reared its unpredictable head in fits and starts. Frank's mother was a depressive and at times overbearing. Her older brother would eventually be diagnosed with schizophrenia. These facts weighed heavily on the young and impressionable Frank. In a piece about the book in the New York Times, critic and biographer Arthur Lubow poignantly points out that Frank's work in Cherry Hill encapsulates the non-Kodak moments of most people's lives. Frank and I caught up just before the end of 2020 to discuss Cherry Hill. Here's Jona Frank. I'm curious, how long did this incubate, the Cherry Hill project, and how did you arrive at the format, which is sort of a mix of memoir, prose poetry in a way, and photographs, which of course you are known mainly as an artist, as a photographer?
Well, I think that so much of it came out of the visual for me. I mean, and because all my previous work has been photography. But I carried these stories around with me, and I just had this, I thought about how my photographs all came out of personal experiences. You know, there is this quote by Evelyn Hofer, the German photographer, who for every iteration of the book, really till the very, very end, this was going to be the first page of the book. But the quote is, in reality, all we photographers photograph is ourselves in the other all the time. And so if I look back at my previous work, I can look at high school and my first book, and I remember the day that in my studio I had all of these pictures from high school and I was editing them, and I realized as I looked at all of these faces of these high school students from all around the country that I recreated my own high school experience. And I could look at the pictures and say, this is that person that I went to high school with, and this is that person and that person. And I understood at that moment what Evelyn Hofer meant, that we, all of our photographs come out of our own experience. And the same with the Religious Right Project, where I grew up in a very Catholic family, and I felt like if I became really devoted to my religion, would it be as much part of my life as it was for these kids? And so all of these things, you know, there's a root to everything that I'm doing in my own life. And really what I'm doing with this work is turning it on its side and saying, I've made portraits of all these other people for so many years that now I'm going to make this portrait of myself. But if I was going to tell this story, I needed to write it as well as photograph it. And the writing is meant to feel photographic. It's meant to feel like there are these blurred edges between beginnings and endings, and that that some of it has the brevity of a snapshot. And there are characters in it, me, my mother, my brother, that anchor the story, but that we sort of move in and out of this period of my life.
What I really loved about it was the stylization of the photographs and the recreations of the set pieces from your own life, and that the book is building toward this rejection of the supposedly idyllic suburban existence of post-war America. And so I think that thread runs through this book pretty clearly. But there's a lot of playful moments and a lot of humor too. And I think it was really fun how you balanced that out, because there's obviously some serious stuff with both your mother's mental illness and your brother as well.
I actually love that you point out the humor, because in a lot of what's been written about the book, I mean, obviously those are heavy issues with my mother and my brother, but that I really wanted there to be my sense of humor in it, and that hasn't been noted very much. And part of me is like, I hope people see that there's also things in it that are meant to be funny, that are meant to be, sort of the absurdity of what the repetition of this life. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, not to single out a few episodes, but there's that Lucky Charms, I guess we can call it the Lucky Charms incident, which, that you kind of recreated, where you bump into this display at a grocery store, and it's a total almost Seinfeldian moment. But yeah, to break that up with all the other sort of, stuff going on in the book was delightful. And I assume that was partially Alan Rapp and some of the other folks on your team were responsible for you sequencing this in this order. Or did you, kind of have the sequence of this in your head yourself as you were doing it?
Well, I had a pretty strong sense of the sequence, and when I started writing, I knew where I wanted to end up. I mean, I knew that I wanted to end backing out of that driveway and, headed to wherever I'm headed, which I like is that it's undefined. I like that it's sort of this openness of like, it's just about what you have to do is go. You don't have to specifically know where, but you just have to go. And, but there was a pretty loose thread through the book of that school would be the anchor, and that would be the path that we follow. I mean, the writing was definitely a challenge, and I worked with a writing teacher, and I loved the writing. I mean, I loved it in a way that I didn't expect to love it, and I found it really fulfilling in the way that, having this exchange with people and photographing people and spending time in their world has provided me for so many years. But there was this solitude in the writing, and it was just the way things would work out in my head. It was amazing to me. Like I just had no, if somebody had said, you're going to really indulge in the writing and it's going to be incredibly fulfilling, I just don't know if I would have believed them. I think, so it was really this lovely surprise. And, but I also will say that that sometimes the writing made me discover something about myself that I was like, I felt it made me feel a little bit crazy. Like when I was really in the midst of writing, I couldn't see people. And I remember that twice I tried to meet like a friend for a coffee or something, and they would be talking to me, and I had this incredibly strange experience of seeing words, like actually seeing words, but out on the side of them. And twice I had to say, I'm sorry, I have to leave, and just really abruptly. So fortunately, I have good friends who forgave my what must have seemed like lunacy at the time. But it was that my head was so involved, and this was emerging, like the stories were emerging, and how to write them was emerging, and I just needed to be in it. But it was, that was a fantastic experience.
Yeah, I think the writing feels very cathartic, and then you can almost feel the conformity in some of the, of some of your style shoots. So, did you have most of the writing done before you basically cast Laura Dern? I should point out, Laura Dern is cast as your mother, and there are 3 iterations of you, or 2, yeah, 3, right? 3. Three
yeah.
iterations of young Jona. So how far along was the project? I guess you had to sort of write the outline first before you actually cast these people and then started to build these, elaborate sets to sort of recreate, your childhood home.
Right. Well, I had written like a handful of the stories and knew stories that I wanted to write, like ideas of things I wanted to write. And, but I wanted to get a sense of, is this going to work? I mean, I'd never done anything in this form before, in this narrative form. Now I'd worked on films and I've made documentaries and I've photographed real people in their environments, but this idea that I was creating these environments was very different. So, I had a handful of the stories written, and I talked to Laura about it, about, playing my mother. And one of the first pictures that we did was the cover picture of the kind of mirror image of mom and daughter holding pies, same dresses in the kitchen. And I wanted to get a sense of how is this all going to come together and work. So I did just a handful of images. And that was in 2016, and then a majority of the pictures were made in 2018. And one of the wonderful things that happened in this project, which I feel like it did sort of take this life outside of me, like things were just coming to me, was that I live in Santa Monica, and a couple blocks from where I live, there is this giant old beach house, and it's marked historic, and it's one of the last types of homes of its kind. And it was sold, and this, the fence had gone up around, and signage went up. And I kept looking at the house and thinking that house would be so amazing to work in. And when the signage went up, I contacted the owner, and I explained what I was doing, and he met me at the house, and we walked through, and it was like being on a soundstage with just this incredible light and big rooms. And he, incredibly graciously said, you can have the house for 3 weeks for no fee, which was unbelievable. So that was amazing. And the thing is it just jump-started the whole thing. It was like I had people in place. I had, production designer in place and costume designer and makeup. But it was like, okay, we have dates, we're ready to go. And then we just hit the ground running. But as the director, photographer, writer, producer, of course, there was one thing to solve after another. But one of the big ones being that the girl on the cover had moved to Chicago in the time between 2016 and 2018. So we had to get her out here and make all that work. But it was all, it all came together. And then later in 2018, a whole other section of the pictures were made at Rustic Canyon Park, which is very close to my house. So And also really mimicked this park in Cherry Hill near where I grew up. So it was amazing because the whole neighborhood kind of came out for the project, and all these kids in the neighborhood were in the project, and I knew all their parents, and it was just this, it really was this thing of let's put on a show, and we all collaborated, and it was a gift. It was just an amazing thing how it came together.
I think the subtitle to A Childhood Reimagined is a very apt one, and it's that German phrase, Bildungsroman, where it's this coming-of-age tale. One sentence stuck out to me, where false apologies were part of the ritual, which, if anyone has sort of a somewhat toxic relationship with their parents, and at any point in their life, it kind of comes back to that, those rituals. Right.
Well, it's interesting that you say the Bildungsroman, because the book, and I had a friend who read an early version. She came back to me and she said, this is actually a subcategory of the Bildungsroman, which is a Kunstelroman, and that is an artist's novel, and it's the story of how an event occurs in a person's life that pushes them to want to go out of the world that they have been accustomed to and find another world. And it is often a creative pursuit. And for me, that event really occurred with my brother and his breakdown. And also this idea of confusion that, that you say, these false apologies, of like having to play out these rituals of things that just confused me, that I didn't believe in, that I didn't feel were true to me. And, but feeling like I had to do these things because they pleased my mother. And hiding my true feelings was part of that ritual. I mean, the cover is very much about that. Like, there's the Alice Miller book, Drama of a Gifted Child, and the idea that the child is used as a mirror, and what is mirrored back to the mother is what she wants to see from that child. So the cover is that moment of, am I doing everything right? Is this who you want me to be? Am I reflecting you back to you? But it's also a play on photography, and it's a play on what Kodak meant as this is a Kodak moment. So get the camera out, this is a camera-worthy moment, and we're going to make it look perfect. And on the outside, it's going to look perfect. But then as you read the book, and that's the reason why the picture is repeated at the end of the book, you have the child Jona grown up, wearing the same dress, holding a pie, and she's reflecting on that day. And on that day, as you turn the page, it's the same picture, but the child looks scared, and mom is correcting the child. And so it's not the Kodak moment. It's the sort of what's behind that story of the presentation.
I should point out, from a humor standpoint, once again, that you are renowned for your cherry pie. Beyond this book.
You know what? You should never have that written in your biography, because everybody is going to want that cherry pie. I mean, the requests for the cherry pie.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be forced into a side hustle. Once this book hits its apex, Jona, I think you're going to be forced into it. There are going to be producers knocking on your door.
The other thing was that my my dream for the initial book signing was to have just to have pie. I wanted to have it be full of pie and desserts, but of course, because of COVID, we couldn't do that. But we did have a soft serve ice cream truck, which was great.
Amazing. I'd say the other thing that really stood out to me, this end of escaping from the suburbs. I mean, I did sort of the same thing. It's this go west, true west, and so that finally happens for you. And I guess you don't really need to write a formal memoir, because this project ended up sort of becoming a hybrid.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. And I mean, I think that came out of this idea that we walk around with these pictures in our head. That essentially this younger self always stays with us and it walks beside us, but that these pictures, we all have this poetic memory. And, that it's the feeling of someday you're just on the freeway driving and you have this very vivid memory of something banal that happened from your childhood. And you think, why am I thinking about that? And I think that I wanted very much to bring those pictures to life. I mean, a few people have asked me, why don't you just use actual family photographs? And the thing about these images is that they're not proof. They're not meant to be proof. They're meant to be memory. And, and there's a big difference. Like Gary Winogrand has this expression that he would say that if you didn't take the picture, you weren't there. But my thought is, what if you were there and you did take the picture, except there's no tangible evidence of it? And, this was my challenge in making the work for Cherry Hill. How do I make tangible evidence of these things that I have carried around in my head? And as a child, I saw images all the time, and I just thought everybody did. I thought everybody walked around, noticing these crazy details. Like I could tell you what every kid at school wore. If on a Tuesday, I could come home and say, oh no, John wore this and he wore this and this boy likes stripes and this, but all of that was just like this encyclopedic thing that I recorded in my head, and I didn't talk about it. So I think that was something I really tried to visualize in the book, of the moment of realizing all of these things that I'm walking around with, I can make tangible through photography. And that's something that as an adult really stayed with me, and I thought so much about thinking and thought, I have all these pictures from my life, and how do I make those tangible? And Nobody, like so many of these moments that we have from our child are not meant to be photographed. They're meant to be forgotten, but they're not forgotten. They live in our head, and that's a big part of why the book is not just told in stories, but it's also told in visuals.
Cherry Hill, A Reimagined Childhood by Jona Frank, published by Monacelli Press, is available now. For the reading this episode, Jona will read an excerpt from Chapter 4 of her new book. Here's Jona Frank.
This is Jona Frank, recording from my book, Cherry Hill. This story is from Chapter 4, Routine. At school, when there were issues in class I wanted to speak out about, I was told to never initiate an opinion. My mother had told me, you can agree if someone else raises their hand, but do not be the first one to speak up. This was frustrating. If I had an opinion, why couldn't I just say it? Why did I have to wait? During the summer, between 5th and 6th grade, I started to develop my own quiet routines. To be more specific, a mild obsessive-compulsive disorder. It started in odd ways, mostly with me just going about my day very uniformly. Straightening things, making sure everything in my room was in its exact place, repeatedly checking out Roald Dahl's James and the Giant Peach from the library so as not to disrupt its placement on my desk, tracing figures in magazines with my fingers before I could turn the page, buttoning my shirt from bottom button to top button, and then unbuttoning from top to bottom and rebuttoning from top to bottom. One morning, while eating cereal alone in the kitchen, I started reading the back of the cereal box, and suddenly, out of nowhere, I knew that I needed to read every single word on the box, or else I could not leave the table. If I sat down to eat, and there were other boxes there, not just the ones I had chosen, I had to read those too. That was the rule. It had to be this way. If the box touched the table, I had to read it. If I didn't do it, I felt like there would be a serious consequence. Maybe a tragic car accident or fatal illness. Dextrose, salt, gelatin, trisodium phosphate, yellow 5 and 6, niacinamide. I began to think about the boxes the moment I woke up. As I slowly descended the stairs to the kitchen, with my eyes closed, I prayed there would only be one box on the table, and that it would be the one I wanted to eat. I hoped the box did not have rules for some contest written on it, because they were often long and quite involved. In late August, about a week before starting the 6th grade, I went to the Pathmark with my father, and I don't know how, knocked over a giant display of Lucky Charms. I was just rounding the end of the aisle, and suddenly the boxes were all over the floor. It seemed like there were hundreds of them. No one else was near me. No one else could have done it. I stood there absolutely frozen, in utter disbelief that I had caused this chaos. The pile blocked aisles and access to 2 cashiers. My father was on the other side of the store. He didn't see it happen. When the manager asked me where my parents were, I could not speak or move. When we got home, my father told everyone, I found Jona stuck in a pile of Lucky Charms. Everyone had a good laugh. And then it was over. I never read the cereal boxes again. My obsession with pyridoxine hydrochloride was finished.
To support Big Table, go to bigtablepodcast.org/bookshop. You can help us and independent bookstore culture at the same time. Big Table is produced and presented by Hat and Beard Press Dub Lab, and Gold Diggers in Los Angeles, and is supported by Invisible Republic, a nonprofit arts organization based in Chicago, New York, and Los Angeles. You can learn more about their community-based programs and publications at invisiblerepublic.org. Big Table would not exist in the audio world without the expert skill sets, friendship, and dedication of sound designer and editor Matea Bain and audio engineer Jacob Ross. Special thanks to Eric Gorman at Gold Diggers and Alejandro Ale Cohen at Dub Lab for early encouragement and engineering prowess. Thanks again for listening.